Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Family Law, Season 2, Episode 9. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, the core of this episode revolves around a celebrity. She's an actress, I think she does music, she does dancing, she's one of those celebrities that's kind of like a bit of a triple threat. And she's in this complicated situation, obviously playing into real life. And I mean, it's a conversation about celebrity in general and just how you have your entire life uprooted. And just, it's interesting. I think it's a nice position that the show took on the view of celebrity because, right, she gets she's high or whatever and she flashes and sad. Yeah, I mean, we've seen that. That has been a few celebrities, because especially with the conversation of conservatorship, it is a word that a lot more people, I myself, know now because of the whole, let's bring it into real life, Britney Spears circumstances. So that kind of brought that word up in a way that, I think it, reached a lot more people, because, like I said, that was the first time I had ever heard the word conservatorship, at least that I can recognize in such a public way with Britney's story. And so you can draw the parallels where Charisma's brother, Tanesh, who, if I'm not mistaken, that's the actor who played Gil in Nancy Drew. Probably more recently, he was in Motherland, Fort Salem. I think that's the most recent thing I've seen him in. But he wants to put her into the conservatorship, which you see from his position of right, when they first talk to him, it's all right, he's not some douchebag trying to control her. He loves her and he's just scared, what will happen. It's right, we find out their parents died and he kind of had to step up and look after her and make a lot of decisions for her. And he raised her, so he is very concerned for her safety and her reputation. He doesn't want her to beat herself up about it later on. I mean, she's also in a relationship with a rapper named Alpha Dog, and it's just, he's a complete another tool. So they were initially able to get her to publicly apologize and even apologize to Tanesh, being hey, I'm sorry. I thought that was going to go a completely different way, because you see at the end there, her smile made me go oh, is she playing Tanesh of yeah, I'm going to, I mean, the whole episode is called about acting out, which has many different layers to it. It involves Abby's kids, which we'll get to that, but also her, because she's kind of acting out. Because she's 23, so she's going to be young and wild and not every person's like that, but it's that conversation of when you're in your early 20s, you are going to be wild. You're older, you're an adult, but then there's also people who be oh, you want to get all of that out of your system. It's but yeah, that's the time to be live your life and have fun, because people will disparage you being oh, all you're going to do is have your quote unquote party it up phase or whatever, and then then you're going to become a responsible adult. It's is that any different from any individual? The fact is people have that stance is so weird. There's so many people, if you rewound the clock and looked at them in their early 20s, they were one person, but then you get older and you change. It's just right, I want to enjoy my 20s and party it up and then continue to be a responsible adult, maybe, if I might. That's a whole other conversation, but it is a thing of, yes, she's a celebrity. She has so many people in the media defining who she is, because she's been a part of the media. She's been a celebrity since she was a kid. She's been acting for so long. She's been a part of this show for so long. And, it's a thing of the media grew up with her. Obviously there's a younger generation that grew up with her. There's also this just view that the media has had of oh, she was this person and oh, look at the hot mess that she's become. To be fair, once again, that's a larger conversation about, using the Britney Spears of it all, but even just any person that's grown up in the celebrity world, of how, yeah, that messes you up being that famous when people get to dictate so much. I mean, especially nowadays where social media is as big as it is, so many people, if you're a big enough celebrity, everyone can post their opinion about you at any point in time. People literally write news articles around you and any fumbles and anything you've said or anything you've done. That's a lot. That's too much. That's a lot for any human being to handle. Some people handle it better than others, but I feel like most people, it's just that can be taxing. It can mess with you mentally. So, and I think that's also why she was kind of quote unquote acting out, but right, she was just being herself. And yes, she made mistakes and she regretted it. Even marrying Alpha Dog at a courthouse, which even Yeah, I was surprised the way that Harry got so up in Alpha Dog's face. It's like, right, it's not legally binding when the person that's getting married is drunk. So it's like, if I found out that she was drunk beforehand, I'm going to get that marriage annulled, but I'm going to sue you, and you're going to be in some serious shit if I find out that you, like, kind of supplied her with the alcohol that got her. Because it's like, you're stone cold sober while she's drunk. It's like you took advantage of her in this situation. Like, Harry stepping up like that. Even Abby was like, whoa, so that's what it looks like when you kind of enter your parental phase. Like, it's actually interesting seeing Harry like that, which also is kind of a slight against Harry too, because it's like, cool, I never had any of that parenting stuff, but you know, who out of anyone, Lucy might have gotten that, because obviously Daniel didn't. So that's why him and Abby kind of bond over the fact is that Harry wasn't much of a father to them, but he corrected a lot of that with Lucy. Still made his mistakes even then, but like I said, I think that's that's why I think this case meant a lot to Abby when she found out about, whoa, a conservatorship means you can have that much control over someone's life. And especially because it's like, right, when the media gets to demonize you and put you in because even the judge is like, oh, I don't want to deal with another drunk in my, like, you know, who can't, like, someone getting drunk in my courtroom. Which I was like, that's such BS. Abby's been sober for a year. She's been doing nothing but putting in good work. And for you to kind of throw her under the bridge like that so offhandedly, I was like, that's super messed up, you know? And because we've seen how hard Abby's worked and how much she's shown herself to be the professional that she is. And so for him to the judge to kind of casually throw that out there like that, because the whole point at the time, like her coming in with Charisma coming in with Alpha Dog made it seem like, okay, she's kind of a hot mess, and that just kind of with Abby being there right beside her, he aimed for the low hanging fruit at that moment. But Abby had a conversation with Charisma, because it is the situation of, you know, we found out from on set, which I love that Cecil was so in love when he was on the Whippet set. He was talking to one of, like, was it Brandy? And he was like, oh, you were so great. She's like, no, I was messing up. It's like, he was so in love. This is his favorite show. And so just him kind of getting so Gideon, you know, fanboying out on this show was just so wild. But you find out that she had a torn Achilles, and she, like, rather than getting medical attention immediately, her brother, he ended up dictating so much of like, oh yeah, these clothes are a little too revealing. She needs to wear something a little more modest, this and that, anything with like any male co-stars, it had to be kind of go by him. Like, he was very controlling in some capacities, but it's because she's a representation of their family's legacy. Her out there, good and bad, is a reflection upon their dead parents, and because they put a lot of like money towards her being who she is. They put her in the dance classes, they took her to auditions, so he wanted to carry on that legacy, but he ended up putting so much pressure on her to be perfect, because it's like, right, you have to be perfect because that's what mom and dad would want. We gotta keep what they would want from you alive. And later on, when Abby's talking to, well, because they had made the whole point, like, oh, is Tinesh really looking out for his sister's best interest, or is it just because he gets a slice of the pie? Like, his cut of all the money she makes is like 20%. So it's like, right, you care more about the money. I think it is a thing of he legitimately didn't realize the box he was putting her in. And that's something she talks about with Abby, where it's like, right, you have so many people making all these remarks about who you are. And for her, it's like, yes, I feel bad about the decisions I'm making. I'm messing up. And she's like, the fact is, I'm influencing so many girls who look up to me, who see me as like, right, they see so much of themselves. And I know that's this hot button issue for whatever reason, like just in a sense of like, oh, you want to like cater to, like, it is a very important thing for people to be seen. Like, I think so many people discount how much that does matter to people. Like, it might not seem like that important to you, but it is so important for a younger generation, where they're like, yo, I see a woman who looks just like me. If she can make it, that means, and someone would be like, oh, she's a celebrity. Like, oh, she's an actor. Like, is that really aiming for the stars? But it's like, right, you can follow your dreams and be whatever you want to be. You know, it's like, it's okay. Like, I think it's okay to be idealistic, and want to dream big, and to have someone kind of be that North Star for you, to be like, this person who looks like me, who comes from a similar background to me, it's nice to know, like, hey, not a lot of people of my ethnicity make it big, and have them be that. And it's, I think that's a conversation I feel like people do discount of how important that is. Representation is important in that regard. I think people just, they nitpick and pick and cherry pick the examples of like, oh, this is why it wasn't, but it's like there are other moments that have shown like why it is so important, what it means on an individual level, what it means on a cultural level, and especially in her case, like once again, that celebrity thing of you feel like you're letting so many people down. And sadly, I think so many people would discount her to be like, oh God, here you are. That's so self-important for an actor to think of that. But it is this realistic aspect of being a public figure like that there are so many people who don't just look to you, they look up to you. So once again, I think so many people can be very like discount that. But Abby hearing that, once again, it struck a chord with her of like so many people put her in a box of just a constant reminder of like the mess up that she made, not just the good work she does. And Abby, because Daniel and Harry had agreed to like a co-conservatorship of like, right, she needs to kind of be reined in some charisma. And so they want to be in a co-conservator. That way we get to help make sure she gets the help she needs without letting her brother have full control. Like that way we get to do what's best for her. But for Abby, it's like, no, she just wants to be a woman. Like everyone pigeonholing her into being this girl. Like this is who she should be. Yes, she's made mistakes and she should be allowed to. At the end of the day, and that ends up being what the judge ends up saying. It's like, right, as long as she's doing something that's not necessarily negatively affecting, like not unless she's not harming anyone anyway. Yes, even if she's flashing her tits, it's like, that's not like harming anyone. You could be like, oh, it's indecent, whatever, from a moral standpoint, but it's like, it's not like hurting anyone. So any mistake she makes, as long as she's not getting drunk and drunk driving, that's another thing entirely, right? But it's just like, right, you can have like make some mistakes and do this and that. It's like, yeah, she's got poor choice in men and flashing her boob, but it's like, that's her choice. She should be allowed to be a grown woman and people should be able to see her for who she is without everyone, the media, her own brother, everyone painting a narrative of who they believe she is instead of letting her be herself. Because I'm sure a lot of that pressure, it's just that you got to be a certain way. And she was kind of, I think, putting herself, not only were people putting herself in a box, she was kind of putting herself in a box of, I've got to be this perfect person all the time. And individuals and humans are allowed to fail and make mistakes. I feel like that's not always the case with celebrities. Like sometimes it is a thing of you are held to a higher standard of like, yeah, you mess up. Some people forgive you, some people won't. And once again, it just depends on the circumstances. And in Charisma's case, I don't think she's done anything that's warranted people being like severely disappointed. Like, oh, like I gave up on her, yada, yada, yada. Once again, there are things that some people have done that you're like, no, it's okay for you to be like, I can understand someone being like, I'm done with them. There are egregious things that people have done, celebrities in particular, but there's also things that it's like, right, that's mild in comparison and it's not that big of a deal to warrant you being like, you're a terrible person because of some mild mistakes. Once again, using charisma, not speaking about every celebrity, but specifically charisma in this particular episode of just how she they're mild in comparison, so. And every time I say charisma, I just immediately think of Charisma Carpenter. She's like the only charisma I'm aware of. I feel like I don't know if I'm sure there's gotta be another actress with the name Charisma out there, but my mind immediately goes to Charisma Carpenter because she's the one I'm most familiar with. Like, Charisma is not a name I hear that often, so like, just when I hear, anytime I've been saying it this entire time, Charisma Carpenter ends up popping in my head. But anyway, tangents and all that aside. So when it was all said and done, the conservatorship was thrown out, and they didn't really get into it. I hope her and her brother found, like, I like to think that they found, like, this whole thing was kind of a wake-up call for Tanisha of like, oh, I didn't realize what kind of pressure I was putting on you. I'm sorry, sis. I'm gonna be a lot more supportive of the mistakes you made. I'm gonna try and fix myself than not put you in the box. She ultimately does live the show Whip It, which I love that Cecil was so upset by. He's like, I can't believe the firm I'm working for ruined the one show that's worth a damn watching on television. But he immediately got happy the moment he's like, oh, got a postcard. Oh God, I'm blanking on her name now. I feel so bad. Oh God, the previous person that worked there before Winston. I'm blanking on her name now. I feel so bad. But yeah, he got a postcard and says, like, oh, Nina. It's like, yeah, just when the perfect timing to kind of like raise my spirit. So This episode also led to an interesting thing where, once again, that Harry and Daniel thing is just slowly but surely, like, that relationship just continues to sour and sour. Like, as time goes by, Daniel is taking more and more guff from his dad, and Abby's taking less and less. And he already has that feeling of, well, Abby's going, like, she's not going to stick around, right? Because that's going to cut into his legacy. Like, yeah, he's a partner and stuff, but for one, she chastises him and pokes fun of him. It's like, yeah, but that's their tit for tat. But it's just, eventually, it is grating when you have that and your dad being more positive towards her than you. It's like, she's more of the screw up than I am, yet she gets praised so much because she does good work. And it's also Daniel's fault because he looks down upon Abby, that she kind of was able to kind of swoop the legs and kind of like knock him off balance. But it's like, yeah, like, oh, the choosing not to go through with the co-conservatorship. It's like, wait, why didn't you tell me you were going to make this decision? Because Harry's almost like, why should I have to? He didn't say it, but it's like, why do I have to tell you what I'm doing? It's like, well, we're partners. It's like, because regardless of it all, it's like, right, you're only a partner because, yes, you're good at what you do, but also your sister kind of greased the wheels. But also, it's like, regardless of it all, Harry will always look at Daniel as like, yeah, you're my son. So it's like nepotism, and I'm sure that's also an issue that Daniel has with it, that a lot of people will just view it as nepotism. I'm like, oh, you only got this far and all of this because of your dad. You know, I'm sure that it plays a role. It hasn't really been pushed narratively, but I'm sure there's some level of that. And so later on, when his dad, because he's going to be on like a zooming in for like a British interview, and it's like, okay, here you got to run all these points by me, and it's like, right, Abby isn't under this type of scrutiny and stuff, and you're chastising me about, oh, I should talk a little louder, or I should talk a little softer. Why am I reading my notes? Don't I have them memorized? And the moment Daniel went on his computer, I was like, dude, we know Nico was up there earlier in the episode. I was like, he did something to it, and it's going to blow up in Daniel's face. And lo and behold, Nico had left a dog filter on. It's like, to be fair, that's on Abby. It was an accident, but she was happy about it. Daniel wasn't. And their dad chastised him like, oh yeah, sure, blame an 11-year-old. It's like, it was Nico's fault. But like, I was almost thinking that she wasn't going to say anything. I thought Abby was going to make it seem like, no, that's just some kind of issue that happened on your part. I also love that the Nico and Daniel of it all really points out something I thought was so interesting, that when you actually break down like the family dynamics of who has an interaction with who, like the fact is Nico and Sophie don't have much. Like, Nico has a strong relationship with Harry, but he was like, hi, Uncle Daniel. It's like, and Daniel's like, hi. He's like, yeah, you two haven't interacted literally. I think this episode might be the only time I've ever seen you interact on screen. Like, I don't think it ever came up in season 1. Maybe it did, but it's like, yeah, like Nico's definitely around Harry a lot. And obviously JoJo, their grandmother, and Sophie. Well, I'm just mostly staying with the topic of just like the family at work, the Svensson side of the family. But Nico has a good enough relationship with Lucy to be. They already had a decent enough relationship, but then you add in that Lucy was staying with JoJo and Abby. So her and Sophie had that connection, but like Sophie doesn't really have a relationship with Harry or Daniel. I think she has more of a relationship with Lucy, but even then she's kind of, I still don't even think she has that much of a relation. Like, Nico's the only one that really seems to have like a relationship with the Svensson side of the family. So just that whole thing just kind of put that in perspective for me. So I just thought that was so interesting. But Daniel, later on, after the disastrous interview situation, he's with, isn't his friend's name Michaela? And she's laughing and just talking about how, yeah, you get to show people how funny you are. You're the funniest person I know. You're not so stiff. And Daniel got caught up in a moment and kissed her. And she's like, yeah, I got to go check and make sure my bike's locked. It's like, yeah, that is that awkward thing when you're friends. And because, well, last time we checked, she was still dating someone. We know his relationship soured, the whole, well, she had a sexual relationship with your dad so a little while back. So that's kind of, can't really get over that. But I don't think we talked about whether or not she was still in a relationship or not. I don't remember that coming up. But it's like, it was only a matter of time, and now it's like yeah, we're friends. That's an awkward situation, because I've only had that maybe once. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I've had friendships that have turned into relationships. No. Most of my friendships that have ever kind of gone that direction have been situationships. Let's leave them at that without really fully becoming relationships. I can only think of like two people I was friends with, and then, one was a friend I legitimately kind of had a thing for and wanted to become like more than that, and then another one there was just a situationship. It's borderline friends with benefits type of thing, but like I said, I'd rather spruce it up and just call it a situationship and leave it at that. But it is that interesting thing of like, it is that complicated, like how do you handle that? Because obviously you have a good friend, and crossing over that lane, it's like, oh, this is kind of awkward. Because I started off as friends with like girlfriends, but like that period of time between being just friends and becoming like more had always been on a shorter end of things. So, because some of my relationships, it's not like, oh, I went into them trying to have a relationship, but it just like naturally ended up happening. So those still technically count because we were friends first, but it just, I don't count that as the same thing of like, oh, we were friends for a while and then something happened. That's just my definition, how I view it. I'm sure that it's, different from every other person. But either way, my point with Daniel is that's going to be complicated. They've been friends for a good while. Neither one of them saw that relationship turning into anything more. So how that plays out with Daniel, especially with that going on, and he has a good friend, like, I mean, she's not his only friend, but we've only seen him have like two friends the entire show. His friend that, they went up against, obviously in this episode, they go up against each other from time to time. That's his buddy, plus Michaela, like, so it's complicated. A very sad and heartbreaking aspect to this episode, or complicated aspect to this episode, is we are picking up the Lucy situation, because it's awkward thing of like, right, she has a power of attorney situation going on with Maggie, like, right, and she's gonna have a C-section, because it was like a placenta issue with the baby, and then we're gonna have to perform a C-section and, bring the baby out early, and Lucy is, still the power of attorney, so she gets to make medical decisions on behalf of Maggie. And it's like, well, you guys are separated, you're about to go through a divorce. It's like, geez, like, that's so, but, it's still a thing of, hey, Lucy's here to help. And in fact, the baby's okay, and, Maggie's recovering. And so Lucy spends time with the baby, and and when she actually went home, she's like, yeah, sorry, I know I look like a mess. And Abby's like, no, you look like a new mom. And you can see that smile on Lucy's face. Because, yeah, she might not have wanted the baby before, but, having the baby there does change things. I think someone is allowed to change. But to me, I also bring up, it is complicated. I understand how Maggie feels. I mean, I can be sympathetic, but I can't quite be empathetic because I'm not in her shoes to feel. I'm biased because I like Lucy despite her issues, and I admitted that I'm biased when it comes to certain things. But either way, when it's all said and done, Lucy wants to be a part of the baby's life. She's like, right, just obviously anytime you need help, I want to kind of help with a co-parenting thing. If Lucy didn't put it that way, if she was just like, right, I want to help in whatever way, I don't have to be a parent. But my point, I can understand why Maggie, when Lucy brings that up, is like, no, what, you kind of bailed? And she's like, no, I didn't. Not. It's like, no, Lucy didn't want the baby. The thing is, she just never had those conversations with Maggie because she saw how important it was to Maggie, and that would have complicated the relationship. And Lucy didn't want that confrontation. She didn't want to ruin things. That's kind of why she kind of acted out in her own regard and, kind of cheated. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, I'm sure, but it's this thing of like, I understand where Maggie's coming from, and she has every right to feel that way. It's still a thing of like, right, what we're going through is still a fresh enough wound. You cheated on me, not once, multiple times behind my back. You had an opportunity to come clean, you didn't. You honestly wanted nothing to do with the baby, but now, like, all of a sudden you spent a couple of days with the baby. Once again, people are entitled to change, and I think it would be nice, but I think for her, it's like, I'm moving on, and yes, I have a support system that I won't have to worry about abandoning me. How can you want to be a part of this situation with this child when you wanted nothing to do with it at the beginning? It's like, once again, there are situations where parents were deadbeat parents that have come back into the picture, and it's like, this is still early days, but it's like, you weren't like 100% by my side. To be fair, we were going through what we were going through while I was through the majority of my pregnancy, but it's still a thing of, I don't know. Like I said, I feel so conflicted because yes, I feel bad for Lucy, and I think she's, trying to be better and do better, and she wants to help you out, wants to do right by you and the baby. But I also understand where Maggie's coming from of like, no, you don't get to just, that doesn't make up for everything that you've done, which even Lucy's like, no, that's not what I'm trying to say. So How that plays out, we'll ultimately have to wait and see, because like that could turn into a court thing. Harry was kind of like, right, you don't have to have any like financial or personal responsibilities for the child, but she kind of wants to now. So it's going to be like, if you go down the legal route, that's going to get nasty. I'm sure Lucy's just going to try and approach Maggie, but it's like, do I have any hearsay on it? It's like, you made that decision together when you were still together, and it's like, now that you're split, that is kind of, it's rough. So we'll have to wait to see how that ends up turning out. And then finally, another big part of this episode is Abby's divorce situation with Frank, which he keeps moving the goalposts. He keeps changing and making changes. Now, the newest change is that Abby basically has to, you have to basically, if you're going to be with someone and introduce them to our children, they have to be like a year. It's like, whoa, that's so effed up, Frank, kind of making a decision like that. Like, like, will the same day be applicable in your case? Because we focus all on Abby because she's the one that's dating someone currently. But what happens when Frank dates someone? It's like, are you going to have to be under because if you want to make it even Stevens, you're going to have to like be under that same stipulation. You can't have anyone around. Like, that's so messed up, That is like, because it's like, it has to be like a year to show that it's serious. Because once again, a serious relationship changes from different person to person. And it's like, like that's because it is Frank being vindictive. It's like, right, kind of, you said I embarrassed you at that thing the previous episode, so you're just doing this to kind of make a point. And he's like, I just want certain people around my kids. It's like, well, the guy's respectable enough. I mean, that doesn't indicate, I was about to say, like, he has, he's a firefighter, so that speaks volumes, but it's also like, to be fair, that doesn't mean anything, because there are people of any career, like even a very prestigious job, there's still people that are complete and utter garbage human beings in those jobs, so that doesn't mean anything, but, you at least give some slight leeway until he's proven to be a complete and utter douchebag, because we've never circled back, not unless it's a scene or something that's been cut from one of the episodes, but we haven't really been back to, I don't know if Abby's been like around Aiden post finding out he's got like 2 roommates, and it's like you could tell how that kind of rubbed her the wrong way, and she hasn't been wrecking around Aiden until this episode because of that, because Nico pulled the fire alarm, which I love Frank interpreted that as like cool, so now like, just when I brought up your boyfriend, all of a sudden Nico pulls the fire alarm and he happens to show up. It's like, well, he's a firefighter in the city, so he's just going to show up because he just happened to be on shift, and it's not like in the moment Aiden's like, wait, this is your son? And I love Frank being like, yes, our son. It's like, come on, Frank. But even Abby's kind of like embarrassed a little because it's like, damn it feeds into Frank's point. But yes, sure, Frank, I set this all up in motion. But also, it's just, once again, she hasn't really been around Aiden. That, once again, and a minute or so is always removed from these episodes. One scene in particular, at least for the U.S. airing of the episode, so it could be that maybe that was something that was quickly handled in this episode, but because I'm watching the American edited version of the episode, once again, it's missing a scene that's about a minute or so it could have been covered in this episode, and I just don't know it, so it's an annoying thing. They usually don't have that massive of an impact, but that's still something that hadn't really been covered yet, and that could have been like a one scene thing that has been covered that I just don't know was kind of at least updated or tackled. But I mean, because even Abby made a good point about like, right, you want to bring up my, like, complicate my dating history and about me or being around the kids with that. But it's like, what about you leaving text messages for our son to find and yada, 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 so on and so forth. Or the fact is they haven't even been around the grandparents, because even grandma, because Nico was like, oh, can I go to can I see JoJo? It's like, yeah, JoJo's out of town for a little bit because she's dancing around the aspect of, I haven't told the kids, because she's defended Frank in the past and she's doing it now, where it's like, I don't want the kids to know you're the reason why they can't see their grandmother. Because Sophia already started this season, earlier in this season, kind of hating her dad, and they found a middle ground again, but obviously when it's all said and done, when they're back, kind of going back through the paces of what's going through this divorce and stuff, and they got the evaluation from the therapist that like interviewed the child protective person that interviewed everyone, and there's dirt on both sides. Sophia's got stuff to say about Abby. Nico's got a lot to say about his dad. It's like, yeah, he ended up calling like someone at school, like a teacher or whatever, a B word, because he's like, yeah, that's what my dad calls my mom. Sophia, because of everything she's kind of going through, she ended up like drinking. She's like her way of dealing with things is the same way her mom dealt with things. And Abby's just like, well, how do you know she's not just a teenager experimenting with alcohol? It's like, yeah, that can be such a slippery slope, because yes, there are teenagers who sadly do take do it without, like, do drink, which you do not drink until you're the legal age. I want that to be a little disclaimer I'm adding, because I am someone who drunk, like, I drank when I was underage. That was just my vice of dealing with certain things I was going through. I don't talk about it a lot, but I think that's also probably why I don't really drink alcohol at all. Like, I haven't ever since I've been able to legally drink. I every once in a while, but it's like it's so far and few between when it comes to me and alcohol. I'm just not the biggest fan of it. But either way, so it can be both. But considering like Sophia found out like, oh, you were going on a date, and it's like, you were supposed to hang out with us, but you bailed on us just to go on a date. So it's understandable. And, she's also like, right, my grades are falling because I'm, having to leave. I'm leaving stuff behind because I'm bouncing between two different places. So that's complicated. Nico's also feeling the effects, because that's why he pulled the fire alarm, and him and Harry had this nice conversation where he was like, I don't really know why I did it. But Harry had talked about the trouble he had gotten into, and he went to boarding school, and it's like, oh, that must have been nice to have the freedom, which he was like, yeah, it was, but it didn't change the fact is I miss my mom and dad, which Nico misses his family. Like that, both of them are acting out in the way they are, because Sophia and Nico, because they both miss, like, despite how much of a mess it was, their family was a mess, and it's been going through some messy stuff for a while, but it's even more of a mess now, and it's complicated when both of your parents are fighting, and you're not supposed to pick sides, but you feel like you have to pick sides in the situation. So, but Nico admitted, like, right, he wanted to pull it because he couldn't understand it. He kind of gave into the intrusive thoughts, but it's because, and the way Harry put it was, oh, like, so many decisions were kind of made for you in life that you kind of have to, that was a decision you got to make on your own. So it kind of parallels with the charisma of the episode, but charisma as in like the person and not just like the adjective or the word charisma. Is charisma an adjective? Yeah, it is. I'm assuming it is. I don't know. Either way, like from a grammar standpoint, but either way, tangents and all that aside, it is kind of a back and forth, and because Abby's lawyer was like, right, none of us want to go to court, but Frank made it clear. It's like, no, I want to go to court. It's like, she's like, really? You really want to do this, Because he believes like, oh, I'm in the right in this situation. She's like, all right, let's do it. All of my dirt is already out there in public. It's been out there for a while, my issues. Are you really ready and prepared to have all your dirty laundry aired out there for everyone to know, even your kids? I mean, they already know, but like your colleagues and everyone will fully know. And are you okay with that? And even Abby's sticking the point of, in a few weeks, I won't be a family lawyer anymore. So it's like, I'm me being who I am. I'm going to be back in my position, and that's going to help my cause even more, of like showing how much I progress and I'm doing better, because I'm no longer having to like, be in my situation of kind of having to like work in family law. I get to go back to my position and everything, or at least I can work in my position again, and shows that I'm on an upswing, and that shows like my dedication and progress with my sobriety. So it's going to paint her in a better picture, and the affair and all the nonsense that Frank has been up to. It's just like, like I said, I'm so curious to see how this all wraps up, and like, can this show make, like I said, I've been very anti-Frank for a while now, and I don't know if the show is going to be able to swing that back around, because it is a thing of, divorces can be messy, and it's complicated on both sides of like, right, he took Nico's tablet so he couldn't talk to his mom, but it's like, yeah, but I wanted him to study proper, I want him to be well rested for a test that he's going to have the next day. It's like, well, considering all the nonsense Frank has pulled, that might be true, but it's going to be painted in a very specific light, because he's been very petty when it comes to Abby. Whether or not that was his intention or not, it's still going to come off that way. I can only assume a bit part of the season finale is going to revolve around the court case, and that's definitely going to be interesting to see how that all plays out, how this season ultimately wraps up. We'll have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good Bye.